Right now, at this exact moment, two of Donald Trump's most powerful men are on a plane heading to Pakistan. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today, Saturday morning, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff packed, wheels up, destination Islamabad, and Iran is already there. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghi landed in Islamabad last night. He met with Pakistani officials this morning. The Pakistani mediators, according to Al Jazeera's correspondent on the ground, are describing themselves as cautiously optimistic. But Iran's own foreign ministry spokesperson posted something on X just hours ago that stops that optimism cold. He wrote, "No meeting is planned to take place between Iran and the US. Read that again. The White House says direct talks are happening. Iran says no meeting is planned. Both statements are live. Both are official. And both are coming from this morning, April 25, 2026. This is where this war is right now, two sides that are technically in a ceasefire, simultaneously sending delegations to the same city and publicly disagreeing about whether they will actually sit in the same room. Let's break down exactly what happened in the last 12 hours, because the details of this morning are more important than any analysis. Araki arrived in Islamabad on Friday. Pakistan's foreign ministry confirmed it. They said he was there for ongoing efforts for regional peace and stability. Careful language, no mention of American negotiators. An Iranian spokesman then added that after Islamabad, Araki will travel to Oman, then to Russia, a three-country diplomatic tour, notably no mention of America anywhere in that itinerary. On the American side, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt went on Fox News on Friday and said something that changes the framing entirely. She said the Iranians reached out. She said Iran asked for an in-person conversation exactly as Trump had requested. And so, she said, Trump is dispatching Witkoff and Kushner to go hear what Iran has to say. So America is saying Iran called, Iran is saying no direct meeting is planned. This contradiction is not new in this conflict, but today it is happening in real time, with both delegations physically converging on the same city, and the outcome of the next 48 hours could determine whether this ceasefire holds or collapses. Entirely. Here is what makes today different from the last time they were in Islamabad. The first round of talks, on April 11th, was led by J.D. Vance. The Vice President of the United States sat in that room for 21 hours. That was a signal of how seriously Washington was treating the process. This time, Vance is not going. Leavitt confirmed it explicitly. Vance will stay in Washington. He is on standby. He will travel to Pakistan only if, in the White House's words, it becomes a necessary use of his time. That is a significant downgrade in the American delegation. The previous team was Vance, Witkoff, and Kushner. This team is Witkoff and Kushner. The vice president has been pulled back, whether that is because Washington is less invested this round, or because they don't want to spend Vance's political capital on a meeting that may not produce results. Both readings are concerning. In diplomacy, the seniority of the person you send is the message. When you send the vice president, you are telling the other side that the president himself is personally invested. When you send the real estate developer and the son-in-law, both capable, both connected to Trump, you are sending a different signal. You are saying, we are listening, but we are not yet at the table that closes things. And the timing of their arrival has already shifted. CNN reported that Witkoff and Kushner are now not expected in Pakistan until Sunday. They were supposed to leave Saturday morning. The schedule slipped 24 hours before talks that may or may not happen. The American delegation's arrival time is already uncertain. Now let's talk about what Iran's president said this morning, because it did not get enough attention. Masoud Pezeshkian issued a statement urging the people of Iran to reduce their electricity consumption, not a policy memo, not a bureaucratic announcement. The president of Iran on a Saturday morning asking 89 million people to use less power. This matters because of why American and Israeli strikes damaged Iran's energy infrastructure during the war. The grid is under strain, cities are experiencing power cuts, and the president is asking his people to manage the shortfall not because the country is collapsing, but because the damage is real and the repair takes time. This is the Iran that is simultaneously sending its foreign minister to Islamabad to negotiate a peace deal, a country managing electricity rationing and running parallel diplomacy at the same time. That is not the picture of a nation that has surrendered. It is not the picture of a nation that is comfortable either. It is the picture of a nation enduring. Now let's talk about what Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Friday, because this was the American government's clearest statement of its current strategy. Hegseth said if Iran does not make a deal, its economy will collapse under what he called the unrelenting pressure of the naval blockade. He said the blockade will remain in place for as long as it takes, no deadline, no condition except a deal on American terms. The same day, the U.S. military confirmed it has now redirected at least 33 ships since the blockade began on April 13th. That is 33 vessels that were turned away from Iranian ports or from carrying cargo to Iran. That is 33 data points in the argument that the economic squeeze is working. But here is the counter data that Hegseth did not mention. Britannica's updated entry on the 2026 Iran war updated just this morning notes that when oil prices surged from roughly $70 a barrel to an average of $103 a barrel in March, Iran saw an average boost in oil revenue of nearly $25 million per day. The war that was supposed to strangle Iran's oil income initially produced a windfall. The blockade disrupted that windfall beginning April 13th, but China's alternative architecture, the dark fleet, the relabeled crude, the parallel payment systems has not been disrupted, and there is zero public evidence that it will be. Hegseth's as long as it takes assumes Iran cannot find oxygen outside the system America is blocking. That assumption has not yet been proven correct. Now let's talk about what Iran's defense ministry said this morning, because this is the other side of the same conversation. Iran's defense ministry issued a statement through the ISNA news agency saying, and these are their words, that the enemy is looking for a face-saving way to escape the war quagmire it has become trapped in. Read that next to Levitt's statement. America says Iran reached out and asked for a meeting. Iran's defense ministry says America is looking for a way out. Both statements are public. Both are from this morning. Two governments, one city, completely opposite narratives about who needs whom. And then there is the thing that almost nobody is covering today that might actually be the most significant development of the entire week. Flights resumed from Tehran this morning for the first time since the war began on February 28th. Commercial flights departed from Imam Khomeini International Airport in Tehran. Flight tracking websites showed 4 departures to Istanbul in the early morning hours. Iranian carriers, real passengers, Medina, Muscat, Istanbul, the first group of destinations. This is not just a logistical update. The resumption of civilian flights from Iran's capital is a signal. It says the country has enough stability and enough infrastructure confidence to begin reconnecting to the outside world through the most visible civilian channel there is. You don't resume international flights from a capital that you believe is about to be bombed again. This is Iran saying, at least at the civilian infrastructure level, that a return to full-scale war is not its expectation for the immediate future. Now let's look at the Lebanon situation, because it is running parallel to the Iran-US track and the two are directly connected. Trump announced a 3-week extension to the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire after White House talks with Israeli and Lebanese envoys on Thursday. 3 weeks, not 2 weeks like last time, 3. And within hours of that announcement, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said Israel would continue striking any threat. Hezbollah fired rockets at a northern Israeli settlement, citing Israeli violations of the ceasefire. An Israeli airstrike killed a Lebanese journalist in the south. Lebanon's government called it a war crime. 3-week extension, announced Thursday, already showing fractures by Friday morning. The Iran-Lebanon linkage matters because every time Israel strikes in Lebanon, Iran uses it as justification to maintain restrictions on Hormuz. Araghchi and Ghalibaf have both said it explicitly. The ceasefire only makes sense if it includes a real halt to hostilities everywhere, including Lebanon, as long as Israel is striking in Lebanon. Iran has a political and military reason to keep its hand on the Hormuz lever. And Israel's defense minister said this week that Israel is prepared to resume the war against Iran and is awaiting a green light from Washington to return Iran to what he called the age of darkness and stone. So while Witkoff and Kushner are flying to Islamabad to hear Iran's proposal, Israel's defense minister is publicly waiting for permission to resume bombing. That is the diplomatic environment inside which this weekend's talks are happening. Now let's talk about Pete Hegseth firing the Navy Secretary, because this happened Friday and it connects directly to what's happening in Hormuz right now. Defense Secretary Hegseth dismissed Navy Secretary John Phelan on Friday. Undersecretary Hung Cao, a 25-year Navy combat veteran, was named acting head of the Navy immediately. This is the 34th senior official removed under the Trump administration. The timing matters. The United States Navy is currently running the most complex naval blockade operation it has conducted in decades. Mine-clearing operations in Hormuz, intercepting vessels across the Indian Ocean, operating alongside 3 aircraft carriers in the world's most contested waterway, and in the middle of all of that, the civilian head of the Navy was fired. The Pentagon said Hegseth's operation has been laser-focused from the very start on the goal of Iran never getting a nuclear weapon, but the original stated goals of the war included regime change, protecting Iranian protesters, destroying missile capabilities, and seizing oil resources, objectives that shifted multiple times in the first weeks of the conflict. The firing of the Navy Secretary while the Navy is running an active blockade is either a personnel decision unrelated 2. Operational posture, or it is a signal that Hegseth is consolidating his control over the military chain of command at a critical moment in the negotiations. Either way, it happened Friday, and it happened the day before Witkoff and Kushner flew to Islamabad. Now let's talk about what Chevron's CEO said this week, because it was buried in the news cycle, but it tells you something concrete about how the business world is reading Hormuz. Chevron's chief executive said publicly that the U.S. Navy will likely need to escort commercial vessels through the strait once it reopens in order to ensure adequate security, not a temporary escort, a sustained presence. An oil major is telling the world that even after a deal, the strait will not return to normal quickly. The mines will need to be cleared, the trust will need to be rebuilt, commercial shipping companies will not send tankers through 21 miles of water without military cover until they believe that cover is reliable. This is what post-war Hormuz looks like even in the optimistic scenario. It is not a switch that flips on, it is a process that takes months. Let's look at Trump himself, because what he said Thursday at his press conference and what he didn't say tells you something important about the current American posture. Trump said he is in no rush to make a peace deal. He said the war has had less of an effect on both stocks and oil prices than he expected. He said he could make a deal with Iran right now if he wanted to, but he is willing to wait for an everlasting agreement. No rush, less effect than expected, willing to wait. This is not the language of a president who believes his adversary is about to collapse. This is the language of a president recalibrating the timeline. The White House originally predicted the war would last for 6 weeks. It has been 57 days. The Navy is in a complex blockade. The ceasefire is fragile. The talks have not produced a breakthrough. And Trump is saying, "Don't rush me." The question is whether that patience is a negotiating position or a genuine reassessment of how long this conflict will last. One other thing Trump confirmed Thursday that had been the subject of intense speculation. He said explicitly, for the first time, that the United States would not use a nuclear weapon in Iran. He stated it clearly. This came days after he posted on Truth Social that he would erase Iranian civilization, a post that drew widespread international condemnation. Clarifying that the U.S. will not use nuclear weapons is not a minor diplomatic footnote. It is the kind of statement that has to be made when the previous statement left enough ambiguity that allied governments and international bodies were formally expressing alarm. So now let's put today's picture together in a single frame. Aragki is in Islamabad. He met Pakistani officials this morning. Witkoff and Kushner are flying now, reportedly arriving Sunday, not Saturday. Iran says no direct meeting is planned. America says Iran reached out. Pakistani mediators say they are cautiously optimistic. Tehran's president is asking citizens to cut electricity use. Iran's defense ministry says America is looking for an exit. Flights are resuming from Tehran. The Lebanon ceasefire is already fracturing. The Navy secretary was fired yesterday. Trump says he's in no rush, and somewhere in Hormuz, mines are still in the water. That is today's reality, 57 days in. Now let's be direct about what the next 24 to 48 hours actually mean. If Witkoff and Kushner arrive in Islamabad and Aragki finds a way to be in the same building, even if Iran publicly maintains it is not direct talks, even if the channel goes through Pakistani intermediaries. In adjacent rooms, that is progress, that is the conflict not getting worse, that is the gap not widening. If Witkoff and Kushner arrive and Aragki has already left for Oman, having conveyed Iran's position to Pakistan without sitting in any room with Americans, the second round of talks has effectively produced the same result as the first: no agreement, no framework, a ceasefire holding on the thinnest possible thread. And if that happens, Trump's stated patience, "I'm in no rush, don't rush me," gets tested, because the domestic political clock runs on a different schedule than diplomatic patience. Congress is watching. Allies are watching. Oil markets are watching. The energy secretary warned this week that gas prices may not return to pre-war levels until next year. Trump contradicted her publicly, but the data says ordinary Americans are feeling this war at the pump every single day. The White House says Iran's side showed progress in the last couple of days. Leavitt specifically said that she would not define what that progress is. She said the president made the decision to send Witkoff and Kushner to hear what the Iranians have to say. Progress. That word is doing a lot of work in the absence of specifics. Progress could mean Iran modified its position on the nuclear timeline. Progress could mean Iran signaled flexibility on the mechanism for uranium storage. Progress could mean Iran simply agreed to be in the same city at the same time as American negotiators. Which, given the contradictory statements from this morning, may be the most that can be confirmed right now. Hear what they have to say, not negotiate, not finalize. Hear That is not the language of a deal being closed. That is the language of a process still trying to find its floor. The most important single development from this morning, the one that changes what today means, is the flight out of Tehran for planes, Istanbul, Medina, Muscat, ordinary passengers, buying tickets, checking bags, walking through a terminal that was closed for 57 days. That is Iran opening a door, small, civilian, non-military, but a door. A country that closes a door to civilians before a ceasefire breaks down, and a country that opens a door to civilians is signaling it believes, at least for now, that the ceasefire will hold. There is one more story from this week that connects the dots between what is happening in Hormuz and what is happening on dinner tables in countries that have nothing to do with this conflict. The World Food Programme released a report Friday. It found that acute food insecurity levels are alarmingly high in 10 countries, including Sudan, Yemen, Syria, and Afghanistan, and buried in the regional detail is a line that most people missed. Sudan imports more than half of its fertilizers by sea from the Persian Gulf region. Because Hormuz is functionally closed, those fertilizer shipments have been rerouted, longer routes, higher costs, delayed arrivals. Food prices in Gaza are 85% higher than before the Iran war began. The WFP described the outlook for 2026 as bleak. A war between the United States and Iran is raising the cost of food in Sudan. That is the reach of what is happening in 21 miles of water. And businesses trying to cross the Panama Canal are now paying up to $4 million per crossing to avoid the Strait of Hormuz entirely. Products made from petroleum, clothes, crayons, plastics, packaging are all facing cost pressure that will eventually hit consumers everywhere. This is not background, this is the cost of the standoff running in real time. Every day that the ceasefire holds without a deal, that cost accumulates. Watch whether Witkoff and Kushner's arrival gets delayed further. Watch whether any readout from the Pakistani side describes the talks as direct or indirect. That word choice will tell you everything. Watch whether Iran's three-country tour, Islamabad, Oman, Russia, produces a coordinated counterproposal from all three simultaneously, which would be a significant diplomatic escalation of a different kind. And watch Hormuz, not the geopolitical Hormuz, the operational one. Watch the shipping traffic data. Watch whether any additional vessels move through the strait today. Because when flights resume in Tehran and ships start moving through Hormuz, that is not a coincidence, that is Iran managing a signal. The signal it is managing today says, we are here, we are enduring, we are in Islamabad, and we are not done yet. The question America has to answer this weekend, not next month, this weekend, is whether it can hear that signal and respond to it with something that lets both sides walk away from Islamabad with something real. 57 days ago, nobody planned for this to still be unresolved today, and here we are, two delegations, one city. One ceasefire held together with silence and contradictions, and four planes out of Tehran that didn't exist yesterday. That is today, that is what is real, and that is what matters.